So we are going to continue our More Than a Fan, moving from spectating to being in the game. We've been talking about this for several weeks now, about 2 months. It's really in 2 sections. Last week, John kicked us off with this new section talking about accepting the invitation. So we've been offered this invitation or this opportunity to follow Jesus more closely, to follow Him better, to not just bear the name Christian, but to actually live as a Christ follower every day. And so tonight we're going to talk about the idea of the pursuit and us pursuing Jesus. So I'm going to start with a question, see what kind of answers we get from y'all. And the question is this: when was a time that you pursued something or someone? Okay. So you pursued music as your degree, so you chose it, you are now pursuing it. Hopefully, we'll be able to finish strong. What's somebody else? My wife. Your wife, yeah. Brownie points. He pursued his wife, and obviously you pursued well. Here you are. So, an example I was going to give on pursuit was a guy I went to Union with. Probably the hardest I've ever seen somebody pursue another individual. To the point where, and it's just kind of funny how things work. And if you are in college, you may know it. The dynamics are different, and you get close to people and that you don't even know in weird ways and stuff. But so at Union, you're in rooms of 4. And so I went into Union only knowing one other guy. And so the other 2 people, Randys, they just randomly paired them to us. They ended up, one of them became really good friends. The other one, we lasted a year. He's a great guy, just didn't work out as far as roommates. Well, that guy was heavily pursuing a girl that he had grown up with, went to high school with, but had never dated. And so through the first semester of our time at Union, unhealthy probably limit of pursuit after her, to the point where we had an intervention for him. So I don't know if you watch How I Met Your Mother, but we got 15 or 20 dudes. We went to Chick-fil-A, the Christian Counseling Center, got the Christian chicken. We brought our RA with us, and then so we're sitting there eating, and then we're like, all right, so the reason we've come here today is to talk to you about how unhealthy this is. You're not going to class, you're spending way too much money on this girl. She doesn't like you. Move on, buddy. She's obviously, you're not seeing it. She's pursuing other guys that you, are being blind to. Well, what do we know? They're married now, and so it worked out. He caught her. It worked out good for him, but that's just kind of he set his eyes on her. He pulled the whole Union move, God told me I was going to marry you, which I thought was bold, bold strategy. But apparently him and God are closer than I thought, because he got her. And so this idea of a pursuit, and so if you see at the top of your sheet, did you ever do that? It saddens me that with the technology the way that it is, kids today will never get to truly experience this idea of passing the notes in class, right on the top, pass to Sarah or whatever, and then you tap and you it's like a paper football, and you flick it, and then it gets passed around the room, and then you open it up, and here's the question that you're waiting for 45 minutes to get the answer back to, because it's got to get to her, and they got to do it, fill it out, and then get it passed back without getting taken up. And the question is do you like me? Check yes or no, or there might even be if you're really insecure, a maybe. That way it's I'm not completely shut down. There's still she didn't slam the door shut, but there might be the friend zone's of an option or something, yes, no, maybe. But this idea of pursuit. And so while we do this in earthly relationships, and we've talked about this, kind of walking through this in our relationship with Jesus and being more than a fan, on defining the relationship with Jesus. And are we just kind of playing games in our relationship with Him, or are we being serious? Are we really taking to heart? Are we, in this idea, actually actively pursuing Him? Tonight we'll be in Luke 9, and we're just going to read the first kind of verse of this section that's in my Bible like entitled or labeled "Take Up Your Cross." And it says this. It's on the back of your listening sheet if you want to follow along. It said, "Then he said to them all, if anyone wants to come with me, or really come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me." So in this one verse, really a part that I've always focused on is like the sacrifice aspect of it. Like Jesus tells you that you're supposed to take up your cross and follow him. And so most of the time when I've read this verse or when I've taught this verse, I've focused on the second part of that verse, on the idea of taking up your cross and the sacrifice that it takes to follow Jesus, and even the public shame sometimes you have to take for following Jesus, or the persecution that you have to following Jesus. But the part we're going to look at tonight is that first part. It says, if anyone wants to come with me or come after me, this idea of us pursuing after Jesus, then we must do these things. So are we in this pursuit? Are we in this running toward Jesus? Because we're all going towards something tonight. We're either coming closer to Jesus or we're coming closer to the things of the world. I've heard it described as like you're sitting in a canoe in the middle of a river. You're either moving one way or the other, but you're not just going to sit still. Like you can't anchor in life in just one spot and just sit. You're going to be moving. And so are you actively paddling against the current that this world is trying to push us away from God? Are you working? Are you active in that? And so the first thing that we have to see in this pursuit is the pursuit is intentional. So like Jesus is talking to kind of his followers. He has just commissioned the 12, and Peter's confessed that he is the Messiah, the Son of the living God. And Jesus knows that he's kind of getting into the part where he's got to be a little bit more serious with his disciples. Not that he wasn't serious the whole time, but his time on earth is coming to an end. He needs to know if the crowds are understanding who he is. Do his disciples understand who he is? When he dies, are there going to be people who's going to carry on his life, carry on his legacy, carry on the gospel? And so he asks right before this that very profound question, like, who do people say that I am? And they said, well, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah. Really, the crowds, they had a whole bunch of people, like a whole bunch of different aspects of who they thought Jesus was. But then Peter spoke, Jesus asked, who do you say that I am? Which is really important. Like, yeah, while I want my fans to know, my followers, the ones closest to me, that's who I really want to see if they know who I am. And Peter steps up, he gives the great statement, you are Christ, or you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Well, that runs right into him kind of raising the bar, raising the standard, because when you get closer to Jesus, he doesn't lower the standards for us. Like so many times we want to lower the standards for people, like, oh, Jesus is all loving and Jesus will forgive all, which is true. But we lower the bar so low for people sometimes that I feel like they don't really think that following Jesus is special, because like, oh, anybody can do it. Oh, if I just give my life for Jesus, then I can just live however I want because he's a loving God and he's a gracious God and he's a God who will forgive. But we see any time that people started actually getting close to Jesus, he didn't just say, yeah, go and do what you want to do. He always raised the standard. Even like the woman who was in sin and the people brought her before him and they were going to stone her because she was caught in adultery. While he forgave her of her sin, he didn't just say, oh yeah, keep just living the life that you were living. He said, go and sin no more. He raised the bar for her life. He raised a standard in her life that I want you to follow me, but it's going to come at some kind of cost. It's going to come at some kind of intention on our behalf. And the truth is, you and I, we're not just going to stumble into following Jesus. We're not just going to haphazardly in our day-to-day walk, just in the actions that we make, become good Christ followers. Because that's not the world we live in, with our fallen conditions, with just the time constraints, with work, with the people that are around us. Chances are, if we're not intentional, if we don't intentionally say that I'm going to pursue Jesus today, then we're not going to pursue him. It has to be something that we have to wake up and say, today I'm going to be intentional about my walk with Jesus. We have to have an action plan. We have to have steps. And so that's why when people tell me, oh, well, I don't have to go to church to worship Jesus. While that's true, it's so much harder to be intentional about your walk with Christ if you don't have people in your life holding you accountable in your walk with Him daily. I know that if there's times where I miss like just being around believers, if I somehow am gone for whatever reason and I miss a Sunday, I miss a Wednesday, I know that it changes like my whole week. It changes my outlook on things. It changes the way that I approach my quiet time or my prayer life. It changes things. Because even working in a church and even thinking about the things of God all through the week, it's so easy to get into the mechanics of it that we forget why we're doing what we're doing. And so even coming to things like this on Tuesday nights, if we're not intentional about why we're coming here, it can become monotonous, or it can become just something for show, or just something that we do so we can check it off our list. Oh, I went to Sunday school on Sunday morning. Oh, yeah, I attended worship. Yeah, I sang a few songs. Oh, yeah, I came to Common Grounds. But if we're not intentional about why we're coming, if we're not trying to become closer to Jesus, try to build one another up, if we're not being intentional about these things, then we're not really doing what God is calling us to do. We're not pursuing Him. And so the question, I guess, to be asked is, how does being intentional change the way that you approach a task?
I wrote, you've given it value, so now there's risk involved.
Yeah, so value, there's risk.
Well, I think it shows that like you're putting your time, your effort, you are focused in on that and nothing else.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the deal of when you say yes to this, you're saying no to everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's like marriage, for instance.
Yeah. So, like, for example, like, all right, so you're music major, right? Music, is it education? Music education major. So I could sit here and say, you know what? I want to be a music teacher one day. Okay, what are you doing for that? Well, I'm not doing anything for that. Me just saying I want to be a music teacher, I don't know the first thing about music. I'm not taking any steps to be a music teacher. I'm not trying to learn music. And so without me doing that, me just saying that, like, that's great, but I'm not doing anything to try to become that. So it makes sense, like, Ryan, you're not ever going to become a music teacher because you don't know anything about music. And you're not only do you not know anything about music, you're not trying to learn anything about music. You're not taking steps. You're not committing to anything. Like, I haven't started a degree program. I haven't searched out schools. I haven't taken classes. It's the same thing with our walk with Jesus. How are we going to be more committed follower of Jesus if we're not taking intentional steps and actions? We can say all day, I want to be a better Christian. I want to be closer to God. And that's great. But what are you doing to do that? Are you putting yourself to where you're going to be stretched, where you're going to have to rely on God more, or are you just saying, I want to be a better Christ follower. I want to be a music teacher one day, but we don't ever do it. And kind of the idea of, like you said, you're committing to that one thing, like marriage, for example. And in the book that we're kind of going off of, More Than a Fan, it used the example of people living with each other before they get married. And they said that, and it's true, that a lot of people, they do that to get all the benefits of marriage without the commitment of marriage. So you can say, yes, I want to do all of these things that encompass being married, but I'm not actually going to commit my life before you and our friends and family and before God. When things go good, we can play this, but when things go bad, I have an out. And we're not taking those intentional steps to say, you know what? I'm going to commit to you whether good or bad. And we do that with God so many times. We say, God, I'm going to be a fair weather Christian. And instead of being intentional and getting plugged into small groups and being plugged into ministry to where you're going to be held accountable to be there, we say, God, I'm going to be a fair weather fan. And I'm going to pursue you when things are going good in my life. But when things get tough or whenever I don't like the way that things are happening, then I can pull back and do my own thing for a little while until things shape up, and then I can be more intentional with you. And so this idea of the pursuit is that it's intentional. But second, the pursuit is irreplaceable. Irreplaceable. So that's IRREP and then placeable. Placeable. You can spell it out from there. But irreplaceable. It's this idea of like things in life, your pursuit. You can pursue anything. And that's what I love about, like, if you want to call like the American dream. We all have the opportunity to really pursue whatever we want to. Whether we achieve that pursuit is up to a lot of factors. But we have, I believe, the opportunity to pursue anything we wanted to. If I wanted to become a brain surgeon one day, I have avenues to try to pursue that career. If I want to be, an athlete, there are avenues I can do to pursue that. I can try to be a professional athlete. Whether my skill and ability and talents could never reach there, I at least could pursue that avenue and pursue doing that. But the thing is that in everything in our life, we can replace it with other things. For example, like dating, going through, like middle school, high school, and even some of you who aren't married, your college years, like if the person that you were with or are with doesn't work out, like people and relationships, but not only relationships, like friendships, while it might hurt in the moment if that breaks, like earthly relationships can be replaced, and they will be replaced with other people. Like I just think about like some of the people that I was so close to in my middle school and high school, and I had been told my whole life, like when you graduate, things change, and you're not as close to those people. And I was like, I cannot imagine life without these people in it. And then we've all experienced it. Everybody sitting in the room, after you walk across that stage and get the diploma, like life is different. And those people who you thought you would never not talk to, it's not that you're not friends anymore. You've just grown apart. You're in different maybe areas or different stages of life. And so it's not that they've been replaced, but other people have gotten closer to you. And so, or like I spent so much time pursuing like sports and athletics. Like I went to so many practices and I went to so many games and I spent so much time in my backyard playing those things. They were hobbies to me at the time. And now that's replaced with another hobby. And the truth is, anything in life, a hobby, career, relationship, anything here on earth can be replaced with other things. But our relationship with God is one thing that can never be replaced. It is an irreplaceable treasure that we should hold on to. And there's an example of this, or a story or a parable of this in the book of Matthew. And this is on the back of your sheet too. But in Matthew 13, 44 through 46, we see this picture of this guy who's like a servant or a slave or something. And he's working the field. And it doesn't happen as much anymore. But we can understand maybe back in those days, you don't have banks. You don't have places you could place your money. And so if you had great wealth, what would you do to be able to hold on to it? Well, if you didn't want maybe like neighboring countries or things like that to be able to come in and just steal all your stuff, they would bury it in a field. And they would say, okay, I have this marker. I know that I've buried, almost like the idea of like a treasure chest. I buried this sum of money, or I buried my possessions over here on my land. Well, if you buried it there and then you were overtaken by another country or you died or things like that and you didn't tell anybody else about it, guess what? That treasure is still in that field. Well, this parable in the book of Matthew is about that, where somebody had buried this treasure that was just so great, and this servant stumbles upon it and finds it. And let's just read it. It says this: "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure buried in a field, that a man found and reburied. Then in his joy he goes and sells everything he has, buys that field. And again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls. When he found one priceless pearl, he went and sold everything he had, and he bought it." Just think about that. Like, all right, so say, like, for example, like I was just telling about. This guy, he has all this wealth. He puts it in a huge box, buries it in the ground. He dies. Nobody knows about it. You wander up on it. You're just working the field, and you find it. It doesn't belong to anybody anymore. It can belong to you, but without you stealing it, if you purchase the land, guess what? That treasure is now yours. So you're doing everything you can. You're working hard. You're saving your money. You sell all of the assets. You sell everything you have, and you buy this field. Your friends, your family, you're like, what is this? What has happened to them? Why are they pouring their whole life, their life savings, into this field? And it's because they don't realize that the treasure that is buried in that field you'll be set for the rest of your life. It's way more than you could ever have earned yourself. It's something more than you could have ever asked for, more than you could have ever earned. Like, your life will be covered forever because of this treasure you found. And so you're willing to work as hard as you have to work. You're willing to sell everything you have to sell so that you could purchase to get this treasure that sets you. And it says that's what heaven is like. A relationship with Jesus is like an irreplaceable pearl or an irreplaceable treasure. There is nothing that you could work hard enough to earn the treasure that you would. And so it would make sense that you would be willing to give up anything to be able to attain it, because there's nothing on this earth that could ever come close to that treasure. There's nothing on earth that could ever replace what that treasure is like. And in this pursuit, we're going to have a lot of things that are pulling our attention to say, pursue me, come after me, sell all that you have so that you can attain me. And so that's the question. How do other things try to replace your pursuit of Jesus? What do you think?
I wrote down my own fears and doubts.
Yeah, so you're just afraid of it. Like, maybe it would be like this guy, like you have friends or family that are like, what are you doing? Why are you giving your life to this thing? Like, because they don't understand the reaping that you're going to get when you sell it all for it. What else?
Well, I think it's just like, that's the fear aspect. I'm just uncomfortable, and like I feel like, especially today, like a lot of people want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
So getting out their comfort zone, maybe, if God tell you to do this, but it's just something you, like you said, you weren't good, you didn't like speaking, but you became a minister or pastor. So like that's like totally opposite of what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So I guess that would be.
Yeah. I think things of this world a lot of times, they try to act like they're irreplaceable whenever they can be replaced. But they try to take that on that persona of, there will be nothing else like me. And so whatever that might be, it might be like a career. Like, if in our mind we think, if I can just attain this job, or if I can ever just reach this level, or if I can ever just earn this much money a year, or if I can ever save this much, then I'll have it. And so we allow things in this world to consume our thoughts and our attention like it's irreplaceable. And so we pour everything we can into that. And then if we ever do attain it, we wonder why we feel so empty. And, you have so many athletes who will claim, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I remember hearing one time where they were talking to this guy who had just won, like, the championship. And they said, how do you feel? And he said, it was honestly one of the emptiest moments of my life. Like, you work your whole life not only to be professional in something, but then to win. And then after he won, it just didn't give him the satisfaction that he thought it would. And there's so many things in life that's like that. I know that I was like, if I could just ever finish high school, like, it would be the greatest thing ever. Like, I'm so ready to graduate. And then it was like, if I ever get out of union, like, I'm never going back to school again. Like, every semester at the end, I was like, I'm pretty handy. Like, I might be able to live off the land. Like, do I really need this college degree? Like, if I was just going to live in a van down by the river, like, that's a simple life. Like, I think I could do that. And then I finished, and I was like, oh, I'm going to go back. And so I went back, and then I went back again. And so it's like, it would be very easy. And there's people who do that, though. Like, they're like, if I could ever just finish a degree. Thankfully, I'm not pursuing a degree to give me satisfaction. But people do that. They think, if I can just ever reach that point. But your relationship with Jesus, man, it's irreplaceable. So in our pursuit, we need to pursue something that's worth pursuing. We need to chase after something that's worth chasing after. And so the pursuit is intentional. It's irreplaceable. And then finally, the pursuit is an invitation. So we've talked about this idea, the idea of an invitation. But listen to the way that Jesus asks this in Luke 9:23. He said, if anyone wants to come after me or come with me. He doesn't say everybody's going to. Or he doesn't say, hey, you have to follow me. But Jesus offers an invitation that if we would like to be a part of something that is larger than ourselves, we have the opportunity to make an impact not only in this world, but an impact of all eternity. We have this invitation or this opportunity to live life for something, for a cause that is greater than ourselves. I think that's what everybody longs for, to make a difference, to make an impact, for their life to have purpose and to have meaning. And so they pursue so many different things, so many different avenues, so many different choices. But if we can truly show the world of this irreplaceable, just valuable pursuit, then that's how the world is changed. When they accept this invitation of truly pursuing the person who is willing or who is worthy to be pursued. In 1 John 4:19, we see the idea that we love because He first loved us. And so the whole reason that we can pursue God at all is because He was willing to pursue us. We serve a God who didn't sit idle in heaven while we suffered here on earth. But He constantly pursues after you and me so that we will accept this invitation to follow Him and to pursue Him. And we see the sad picture in Revelation 2:4-5 of the church at Ephesus, where he said that you have forsaken or you have left your first love. And I think a lot of us do that from time to time. We take our eye from the prize in front of us and we start looking at other things, we start pursuing other things, and we have lost the pursuit of our love for Jesus. And it's so easy to do. And so kind of at the bottom of the sheet, you have the boxes there, like the note that you maybe passed in school. But if you were to be honest tonight, and if Jesus were to somehow, maybe spiritually through the Holy Spirit, impress this on your heart or on your mind, or if He were to somehow send you a letter and He were to ask you, insert your name, are you honestly, if you were to reflect on your life, are you pursuing me? What box could you in good conscience check tonight? Could you say, yeah, Jesus, I'm pursuing you? Could you say, maybe, like, I'm in this thing, but I could be better? Like, are we friend zoning Jesus? Like, or would you honestly say, like, no, like, I'm not? But the great thing about this is that each time and each day, we have the opportunity and the invitation to change our answer. Like, if we're not in a spot right now that we're really satisfied with, which I don't think we should ever be, just satisfied with where we're at with Jesus, He pursues us enough to where we can repent of where we haven't pursued Him well and start pursuing Him right now. And so I don't know where you're at in your walk with Jesus tonight, and this idea of your pursuit and, you know, each day intentionally saying, God, I'm going to pursue you more today. But I will say that we could leave here tonight pursuing Him better. And so if that's where you're at, then maybe you need to pursue Him better tonight. Or maybe you need to communicate and live in a way to where you can start encouraging others to pursue Him better. Because we all know a lot of people who aren't pursuing Jesus. We all know a lot of people who have their eye on a lot of other prizes. And like tomorrow night at our youth service, I'm going to talk about serving when you don't have time. And I think, we've been talking about on Wednesday nights at Revive this idea of service over self. And so we have just in the same idea, on this idea of the pursuit, we have this idea of I'll follow Jesus when I have time to follow Him. And that's just a false reality of we will never have enough time in our life. Or we'll never have enough maybe longing inside of our own selfish hearts. Or we'll never reach a place in our life where we'll say, okay, now Jesus, I have the whatever to follow you. We're never going to have enough time or money or resources or whatever. So we have to decide today, Jesus, right here in the middle of my mess, right here in the middle of my whatever, I'm going to pursue you no matter what. And so I hope that's our cry. I hope that's our longing. I hope that we consider the cost of what that means. But we accept that invitation and say, God, I know that you're calling me to follow you better. And when each of us decide to follow Jesus better, we can start leading others to follow him better. Because we were never, Christians were never called to lead in a vacuum. We're called to impact other people's lives. We're called to make an impact on the world. We're not called to live this life alone. And so while we intentionally draw closer to Jesus, we help pull other people closer to him as well. I heard a story while we were at the Southern Baptist Convention. I don't remember if Rebecca was in this session or not. But it was a guy who was talking, and he'd been an international missionary at some point. And so he was overseas in one of these countries that you probably couldn't name. And he was really trying to minister to this guy who was a Muslim. And through just constant interaction, he would share the gospel to this guy. And he said that the same response that he would give him every time is, thank you so much for loving me enough to share this with me, but you believe these things because you were born in America and you were raised a Christian, and I believe the things I believe because I was born over here and I was raised a Muslim, and so you believe the things you believe, I believe the things that I believe because of how we were raised. And he said that was the same response he would give him every time he shared the gospel with him. And he said time and time and time again he shared the gospel with him, and that was the same reply. He said, and on the day that he was about to leave to come back to America, this guy was like some kind of translator or driver or something. It was something to where they had constant interaction with each other on a daily or weekly basis. But this guy found him about an hour before he left. And he said, I had a dream. And he said, I don't know how to describe it. He said, at first, and this was just the way that the missionary described it, he said, at first I thought it was eating bad chicken. He said, but then I realized, no, I've had dreams from eating bad chicken, and this is not one of those dreams. He said, so it must have been from God. He said, I was walking down the road, and a staircase appeared in front of me that went up as high as I could see. And he said, but I didn't know how to get up there. He said, I couldn't figure it out. He said, but then I saw you on the staircase, and you somehow knew the way. And he said, and then a door opened, and somebody called your name, and you walked up there. He said, but not only did you walk up there where I couldn't see you anymore, he said, but then all of a sudden I saw you come out of the door, and you walk back down to the ground, and you said, you don't know the way, but I will show you the way. And he said that he picked him up and put him on his back, and he said, you carried me up there with you. And he said, and then I woke up. And the guy was like, that's exactly what I've been telling him. I've been sharing the gospel. And he said, he didn't give his life to Jesus that day. And, a lot of times when we hear stories like that, or when we are in experiences like that, we want to hear that victory story of, and they gave their life to Christ. But that's what you and I do. That's our jobs. There are so many people just like that guy who believe that truth is relative to how you were raised. And the life that you live is just based on the environment that you grew up in. But we know that we serve the one true living God who has given us the directions on how we can not only live with Him forever, but how we can pursue Him daily. And just like the guy in the story who God called his name because He knew him, and he went to him, but then he came back and cared about that guy enough to not only lead him in that direction, but to pick him up and carry him on his back. And there's some people in our lives that we need to pick up and carry and say, you know what, I'm going to be humble enough to carry your burdens for a little bit with you until we can, until God speaks this into your life for you. And so I don't know where you're at on that spectrum. I don't know if you're trying to actively pursue God yourself, and so you need to work that out a little bit more and have mentors pour into you before you can pour into somebody else. But you need to constantly, no matter what place you are in your pursuit of Jesus, have somebody pouring into you and then be seeking to pour into somebody else too. We don't need to just be a well that is constantly receiving and never letting out, but we also don't need to constantly be pouring out and never be receiving. And so in our pursuit, it takes those two things. And so I pray tonight that you can, if you couldn't just say yes, check yes on that box, I'm exactly where I need to be in my pursuit with Jesus, that we can be humble enough to seek Him tonight.